Hello, today we're going to do a second part on our air layering video on Acer palmatum Koto-Hime. In part one that was filmed a couple of months ago or so, you would have seen us repot this very large Acer palmatum. It was in a big nursery pot, and at the time we trimmed it down a little bit. We took it out of the big nursery pot, we combed the roots out, and we potted it into this training pot. Very old tree with a heavy trunk. The purpose of these trees for me here at Greenwood is for them to become stock plants for younger trees. And the way we do this with these trees is by a method called air layering. So rather than taking cuttings, we're taking larger sections of the tree off. I'll explain a little bit. This one here was a similar tree to this one. And a few years ago, I've been taking sections off this for about 2 years. So if I turn it round, this was up here and we've reduced it down. This little tree here, this was an air layer that I took off this tree about 2 years ago, or maybe this was a year ago, this one, judging by the roots. So about a year ago, normally I do the air layers here about 20th of May, once new growth has come out and hardened off. But it's been a bit late of a season this year and we've been quite busy, so we're doing it now at the beginning of June. So this tree, for instance, was kind of on the top here. It was the extension of this growth and it was that sort of height. And we air layered it at this point, it put out roots and we took it off the tree. You can see here the photograph of it, once I'd severed it from the tree, the amount of root that it had. It was then potted up and it's been growing happily in this just plant pot for just a year or so. And it's already got the makings of a nice tree, a good trunk, just the starting of some branch structure that we can start to train. Because this tree here in front of me, all I really want is everything below my hand. I want the heavy trunk and I want to shape a tree out of this. What I don't want is all this growth above. But they're quite a rare tree and they're not inexpensive. So rather than just cut all this growth off, we might as well air layer it, have a bit of patience. It will delay my styling by a couple of years, but a couple of years is nothing in bonsai terms, and it does help me preserve this tree and also get new trees that I can do something with. So to do an air layer, we've got a few different ways we can do it, and we're going to show you a couple of methods today. Basically, the theory is, you can see I've got a little cable tie on here to remind me where I want to put the air layer. I put that on last year just so I don't forget. But the theory is to take off a ring of bark around the branch like this and dust it with rooting hormone powder, and then to enclose that in some sphagnum moss. You can do this in several ways. You can create a ball of sphagnum moss and you can wrap it in a polythene bag, a carrier bag or freezer bag, something like that. You can use plant pots and you can split the plant pot and do it that way, or you can now get these little kind of air layering modules that you can clamp onto the tree and use these. So we're going to use a couple of different methods for you today. So what we need to do this, first important thing, you need a very clean, sharp knife when you're doing air layers. And best way to do it, we found, just to use a disposable scalpel, craft knife. Buy them, they're ever so sharp, use them a few times and then just dispose of them, because it's a very clean, sharp blade. A cleaner cut you'll get better rooting from. So you need one of them. You need some rooting hormone powder. It's not a bonsai specific product. You can buy it at all good bonsai centres, but you can also get it at your local garden centre. I use a little bowl and a little brush for applying that. I'll show it you later. Sometimes a little bit of cling film or some sort of plastic shrink wrap is handy for wrapping around the pots or around the moss. We've got some sphagnum moss. You can buy it. You can, some people like to buy, they even go to the extent of buying Japanese moss when they're doing bonsai air layers. It's not really necessary. You can buy normal long fibred sphagnum moss from your garden centre. This is actually moss that I collected myself from the wild. So this has been harvested. It's got a little bit of grass in with it, but that doesn't make any difference. It's good, natural, fresh sphagnum moss. And people say moss is expensive, and it's not expensive because that's cost me nothing. So we've got some sphagnum moss there, soaking, so it's wet. And on this large Koto-Hime here, you can see we've already marked on here where we want to put some air layers. So we're looking for a thickness of branch. We're looking for a usable branch that will yield us a nice tree once it is severed from the parent plant. So this process can be a bit fiddly, so bear with me and we'll just show you how to do it. So with this one here, look, let me show you a split pot method to start with. So take this cable tie off, because that's just a reminder. Now can you see at this tree, this looks like a tree. We could make this into a bonsai here. If we got roots on it at about this sort of level, it would give us a little bit of trunk before the tree. So if I could do it this sort of level would be a good idea. So first of all, we get a craft knife, as we said before, and we'll make an incision. We'll make it around here, and we want to make this all the way around the trunk, like so. And you want to cut reasonably deep. You need to cut through the cambium layer, so make sure you have a good score all the way around horizontally, so it connects up like that. And then we do another one here. So this is about 20-25 millimeters further down the trunk. It can vary depending on the thickness of the trunk that you're doing, so be careful when you do this. It's using a sharp knife, just the sort of thing you want to be doing on a video. I've got a day off tomorrow. I don't want to end up in hospital with a finger sliced off, so be very careful. Cut it round like that. Once you've done that, you want to do a vertical cut between the two, and normally on these maples, depending, there's a couple of ways you can do it. You can sometimes, once you've done that, you can peel this bark off like this and get it, put it around the tree. A bit difficult with this one because there are a few nodules and buds, so it might not peel ever so smooth, but you can see there it isn't too bad. Look, just work it around them and peel it all the way around. Give it a bit of assistance over here like that, and then neaten up these cuts. So this top one's the most important one because this is the one where it's going to put roots out. So what we're looking at is to cut in here through the cambium layer, so that at this point the tree is forced to send roots out. It seems a little bit drastic, and it often goes against a lot of horticultural practices, because you'll all know that if you get a tree in your garden and you do this to it, that you've severed the flow of nutrient and water to the top of the tree and it can die off. But if you pack this with moss, it will sustain, but it's enough of a shock for the tree to think it's going to die, and that causes it to send roots out at this point in order to survive. So once we've got it cut like that, we want to dust that with some rooting hormone powder. So normal rooting hormone powder is fine. Getting it onto that cut is always a little bit difficult, so I tend to just put a little bit of it into a bowl, and then I use a little cocoa fibre brush and just dust it around that top cut. Get it up onto that cut surface like that. A bit blown away in the wind, but get it up there like that. So then we'll put a split pot round here. So we'll get a plant pot. Something this sort of size should suffice. If you look at the thickness of the trunk, we've probably got a 12mm thickness of the trunk. So we'll just cut down the pot, down the side, across the base, and then we'll just take a little section out around the base of the pot, in the middle, leaving a little bit of the structure there, like that. And then what we're going to do with this is quite simply open it up, put it around the tree like so, and we're going to close it back up again like this. Yeah. So we're going to fill that with sphagnum moss. Now on this tree, we're going to fasten it on like that to stop it moving. What we could do, to get a little bit of wire, I want it to sit at about this sort of level. I'm just going to put a tiny little bit of wire. Well, it's not tiny, it's 4mm wire. But a piece of wire underneath the pot. It's not to act as a tourniquet, it's just to stop this pot falling down. So we'll just put that there, look, just to stop that falling, like so. Then we'll get some thinner wire, or you can use cable ties or zip ties if you want. And I'm just going to reinstate the top of this pot with a piece of wire. Just twist it round. Doesn't have to look that pretty. Just to stop that pot opening up. So we've got it sat on our bit of wire with that piece of wire around the top, and then we can get our moss. Very wet sphagnum moss you want to use, and pack it round that cut. Make sure your tree is in the centre. And not against the side of the pot, and get a good even. Doesn't want to be too tight, don't want loads of it wedged in there. Wants to be have enough air in there, so you don't have to pack it down too much, but sufficiently. So last year when I did these layering on this Koto-Hime, we had a 100% success rate. I did put them on a couple of weeks earlier than this, and I left them on about 10 weeks. So we'll get it up like that, filled up with moss. Now, in order to keep this moss moist, it would help if we seal this up a little bit to stop it drying out too much. Tends to be beneficial. So that's quite wet, that moss. And then we can use some of this shrink wrap. We use this when we're packing trees up to send them out off the website, and we can just wrap this round a few times. Again, it's going to help keep the pot together. I'm leaving the drainage holes open in the bottom of the pot, and you can completely close the top of it up, because obviously if you leave it open, it does let moisture out. What I tend to do is close it up a little bit round here, yeah, but always leave a little bit of a funnel here so that I can put water in, because we are going to have to water that moss to keep it moist while the air layer's on. So you can tuck that in like that, but you can open it up again to put more moisture into that air layer as we want to. So that's a nice neat split pot method. Now we're going to show you another different method. Okay, so last year we put about 6 of these air layers on this tree on different branches. We have a really good yield off them, and I always use the split pot method like that. You can see it's quite easy to do. But we're going to try some of these air layering pods for the first time this year. You know, I suppose they cost more money than doing a split pot. They might be easier, they might not be easier, but we'll have a go with one. And we're going to put it on this section here. So there's lots of little fluffy bits here. Let's just rub those off with the fingers. Yeah. And we're going to try and put it here. So these have got a funnel at the top and a shorter, like a tail at the bottom. So the idea is they're going to sit in here. And the disadvantage with this straight away, they're a lot taller than the pot, so they take up more space on the trunk, which isn't a problem if you've got space on the trunk. So it's always best, I guess, to offer that up first, Yeah, so we'll probably want to do the cut about here in the middle of that pod. So the top cut wants to be just under that little nodule there. So we'll just remember that. And again, as we did before, make a top cut, nice and sharp. Say a craft knife like this, or a grafting knife, or a Stanley blade is the best way to do this. You get more failure with this if you use a knife that isn't sharp. You don't get a clean cut and it doesn't root so well. So that's the top one done, and then the bottom one. All the way round and round the back, fingers out the way like that, and then if we do the same as before and just score down like that, and see if we can't just pick that bark away. A little bit deeper with that. There we go. Just work our way around and remove that. This is a little bit tougher on this one. There we go. We've got a nice clean cut there as we had before, so we'll get put some rooting hormone powder up underneath that top cut to encourage it to root out. And then with this pod, what we'll do is we'll fill it with sphagnum moss, fairly full like that, I think, and then we'll do the other side, get a good load of it in there. Like I say, it wants to be fairly full but not over compressed, I think is the way to go with this. And then we've got the funnel at the top, so that's going to go like here and sit like that against our tree. It's quite wet, so it's dribbling all over the place. And then we'll get this one, offer it up, and this particular one has got corners that you just click together like that, and there's sometimes a bit of a game to get clicked together. That one's done, that's 3 out of 4. That one's done 4 out of 4. And then to secure it a little bit more, look, just put a little cable tie through these holes. There's a bit of tension on this one at the bottom, so if we can put a cable tie like that, and then through this one at the top, there's a hole there, look, so I suppose that's designed for that to go through like that, and this to go through for them to feed back through this side like that, and then just take that across there. So potentially that's easier if you haven't done any air layers before. If you've bought these things, you might as well use them, I guess. We're going to trial them and see like that. So it's probably not as necessary to wrap this one up, because it's got a tighter seal on these sides. We're going to do a few of these like this, and we're going to do a few of these split pot air layers. And this is part 2 of this video. So if you haven't already seen it, check out part 1 a few weeks ago when we actually repotted this tree. Part 2 today, and then part 3 will be in about 10 weeks time, when hopefully we'll be removing these from the tree with roots on, and we'll be potting them up like this. Hope you've enjoyed this video. Please subscribe to our channel and give us a like, and hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you very much.